I'm going to talk today about ways that you might want to improve your inner narrative as one of the keys to unlocking personal transformation. Yeah, so improving the dialogue that you're having with yourself, your inner chatter. Maybe you want to call it your inner critic. And um, and the reason I'm addressing this is because this is something that comes up quite a lot in self-help books. Yeah, change the way that you speak to yourself, and your world will magically transform. And in a certain way, it is as easy as that. But in another way, it's much more complicated than that. So what I thought I would do is I'm going to go through just a couple of examples how we can see others persuading us of something that intrinsically we weren't originally deciding to think about. And then see how we can use what that shows as a method for helping us to persuade ourselves. Okay? Because clearly there is something in this idea of language and your perception of reality and the things that you think you're capable of and the place that you think you take within your world. Yeah. The Probably the most graphic example is a book called 1984, which was written a long time ago now. And it talks about a whole series of ways in which individuals are kind of subjugated to the wills of the infrastructure of the system, let's say. And one of the ways, which is what comes to mind when I think about this, is restrict the ability for people to think by literally restricting their vocabulary. So if you don't have a word for something, well, then you don't have a hook to hang the sense of meaning in your life. And so it kind of makes it much harder to think about because you can't conceptualize it, you can't label it. Now, I'm not talking about going to that extreme. Whether that works or not, I'm not sure. But you can look at lots and lots of ways in the world that prove that the ways that we communicate and interact with others, and therefore potentially communicate and interact with ourselves, can influence our potential, our possibility, our experience of life. Yeah. So obviously a simple one is advertising, right? So in theory, the advertising agencies would tell us that the reason that the advertising works so well is because of their extraordinary message, the inventiveness of their message. But in actual fact, if you look at the data, if you look at the mechanism by which advertising works, typically what's going on is that if you are being advertised at, you don't like that. And so your defenses go up and you try as hard as you can to not pay attention to it. You know, you've got the YouTube video that you want to watch, but before it, there's 30 seconds of some video that you really, really don't want to watch. And so you'll actually kind of actively look away or be just looking for the skip button in order to pass by. There is a mental defense mechanism against being told what to do by somebody else. So we intrinsically don't like this idea of advertising. But when we think we're not paying attention to it, if it's just running in the background, maybe you actually, you're on the TV and you leave the room, you're next door or in the kitchen or whatever it may be, and it's just humming around in the background. Or maybe you hear the logo jingle of the company, or there's some strange music attached to it. The point is, if this is coming at you habitually over and over again, and sometimes you see the video, but most of the time you're not paying attention. Well, the times when you think you're not paying attention, your defenses are down, and so it goes in far easier. And because you're not paying attention, there is no perceptual shift. But gradually, with time, you create an emotional understanding, an emotional attachment to something because it's just there all the time. And so, the reason why advertising is so repetitive is that it will build up an emotional bond where you kind of come to attach a certain type of meaning to a brand, to a logo, to a company's ethos. And the end result, whether you're aware of it or not, and you're probably not aware of it, is that then the next time when you're walking down the supermarket aisle and you're on the washing box, the soap suds aisle, and there's all these different colored boxes. Well, by the time you think that you're looking for the one which is on special offer, unfortunately, your emotions have already made the decision because they've already got an emotional attachment to one or two brands. And so you are led towards that. So effectively what's going on is your subconscious or the back of your mind or your emotional brain or your lizard brain or whatever it may be is being stroked in order to create a sense of security or fun or an alliance with your ego, whatever it may be, that ends up making you think that that particular brand reverberates with your sense in some way or other. And so you go down this whole view, and maybe one of them is absolutely fantastic, but you couldn't care less. You have no interest in looking at the data and the proof of it. There's too many choices. And so you go for the one that your emotions have already decided is good enough. Yeah, it's safe, it's going to work. There's no point in investing all that extra effort in looking at the nuances or whatever it may be, even if the price is slightly different and so on and so forth. Okay. So this is a way where habituation of something that your defenses are not fighting against comes to shift your mind. Yeah. So that's quite useful because that means, in theory, then you could do something to yourself. Yeah, this is the theory of mantras. So just bear that in mind, right? Because we'll come back to that. Another way that you can be persuaded to completely change your mind is through a much more direct approach. So a politician wants to get you to vote their way, wants you to buy into their ideas, okay? They will communicate to you typically in a way where they have 100%, 200% conviction in what it is that they are talking about. They are dead sure about what it is that they are talking about. They're coming at this with hopefully a massive sense of credibility, of authority, as if they are an expert in something. And so they tell you these things, and you might have a view yourself, but your view isn't really 100% sure. You've just got an inkling as to what you think is right or wrong. And this person that's talking to you about it is telling you in terms that are absolutely certain, with a gravitas, with a credibility, with an authority which says, I know this to be true. And so you're prepared to consider the possibility that they know better than you. And so they persuade you through authority. So they actually tell you directly, but because you think that they could potentially know better than you, again, your psychic defenses don't rise up against it. But similarly, if you find a politician that is so far in opposition to your general point of view, doesn't matter how much sense they might want to tell you, if your psychic defenses are already up because you don't subscribe to that party's point of view, well, then it doesn't go in because it's the same as the adverts. When you're staring at the adverts in the face, you do anything but to hear about that. Yeah. So let's just concentrate on those two because we can use that as a way to shift the way that we talk to ourselves. Okay, so one quite clearly is an authority figure, is a sense of sheer certainty, determination, of a sort of a power play between yourself and the message, where the message wins. The message is stronger than you, and so you accommodate it into your world. So that's one way. And then the other way is this concept of advertising, or maybe you could even go as far as propaganda, where you are just kind of habituated to a different type of message which strokes the back of your mind to the point where you become familiar with it, where it becomes normal. And you're not consciously aware that that has shifted your opinion until some stimulus comes along at a later day. You're walking down the soap suds aisle at the supermarket, and you're automatically drawn by your emotions to a conclusion way before your conscious mind is even aware that there is a choice to be made. Yeah. So how can we use this to get back on our own side, to talk to ourselves in a way that allows us to get on with the things in life, or the way that we want to feel, or the way that we want to act, or the way that we want to treat other people, all that kind of stuff, so that we can improve our experience. Yeah. So if I if I take a whole series of post-it notes, yeah, little yellow post-it notes, and I write my favorite mantra on the post-it note, and I stick it on my bathroom mirror, so that every day I'm looking at these post-it notes everywhere, telling me how amazing life is going to be. Okay, every day in every way your life is getting better and better. Yeah, every day in every way you're looking slimmer and sexier and more impressive, or whatever nonsense it may be. If I think it's nonsense, doesn't matter how much it's habituated, it doesn't matter how much it's on the mirror and it's staring back at me, I am gonna flick it off over and over again. Because there is no authority figure, because I wrote it myself to me. So if my concept, when I'm writing this and putting on the mirror, is, oh, I wish this were true, but I don't believe it, I don't subscribe to it, it doesn't matter if I see it every day. Part of my mind is going to be saying to myself, yeah, well, maybe that works for some people, but it doesn't really work for you. Yeah, there's no authority figure. Maybe let's take it one step further then. Okay, so maybe I found this mantra, or these series of mantras, in a book that I think is fabulous, that somehow moved me or other, that somehow these words have magic. Okay, or maybe they came from a video, or a convention, or a self-help guru's 5-day event. Okay, so you've got social proof. That's another way that you can be influenced. So you see lots and lots of other people that it's worked for. So maybe those words, when you put them up on the bathroom mirror, have a little bit of magic about them. They have a certain charisma that adds a bit of influence to it. It adds a bit of credibility to it. But the most important thing, okay, is that in order for any of that to work, you kind of have to become your own authority figure. Okay, so what does that mean? How can you become your own authority figure? Let's take a step back. Why would you want to be changing your inner narrative in the first place? Okay, because for whatever reason you're dissatisfied with your current experience. So there is a part of you which is saying, presumably, this isn't good enough. There's a part of you that's possibly saying, this is as good as it gets, or this is all you're capable of, or stay here, it's safe, I understand it, you won't get hurt, something like that. So there is, if you want to conceptualize it, there is a part of you that says, if I can talk to myself in a nicer way, maybe I'll be brave enough to do the things that I would love to do, but that seem a little bit scary. But then there is another part of you that is saying, that's a little bit scary. I think it's safer if you stay where you are. Yeah. And so what you're trying to do is find a way of shifting the narrative in order to habituate yourself to a nicer, more potentialized you, so that it feels easier to get on with whatever it is that you want to get on with. And unfortunately, the mechanism works the other way around. So you need to make the choice first. You need to become your authority figure in order for whatever it is that you're saying to yourself to be acceptable. So you need to make a choice, okay? The choice being the way that I'm currently thinking may or may not be affecting my current reality. I don't really know about that. But other people seem to say that it does. Other people seem to say that when they shift their words, their reality, their experience has improved. I want this, and this. This is in my way, so you can contribute your own authenticity to it. And therefore, I'm going to try something different. Okay, so I am going to momentarily suspend my disbelief. I'm going to allow the possibility that I don't know everything, and I'm going to experiment with that. I'm going to play with something new, and then I'll see how that feels. And that takes courage. So here's the thing that I think is kind of important when it comes to courage, okay? The brave are not without fear, okay? In a way, you might want to consider those people who you truly admire as overcoming their fear, okay? The reason that they are courageous is that somehow or other they have beaten themselves and ascended that fear and gone on and done whatever it is that they think is right or proper that demanded them to go towards whatever goal it is. And there is an internal struggle against fear which demands courage, which is at the back of the inner narrative. It's an inner struggle against fear. It's the same thing. And so before you get to the point where habituation and familiarization is going to work, you need to have hurdled that fear. So how do you do that? And the easiest way is to just de-emphasize it. It's to reduce the significance of it. So what you're not doing is saying this is an all or nothing last ditch attempt. This is it. It must work. Anything like that. Instead, you're just playing with the possibility that maybe you don't know everything and that there is other perception. And you'll see if by playing with your inner narrative, it might come up. Yeah. So you can do that in a very, very small chunk where the risk of getting it wrong is very, very small. And so you're prepared to tolerate jumping ever so slightly outside your comfort zone and trying something that maybe sounds absurd. Yeah. That is an act of inner authority. So you are making a choice. You're deciding to do something different. And you're doing so in the knowledge that what's the other side is unknown. But you're making it so small that it seems all right to take that step. Yeah. So you've made that decision. Then you have to decide what it is that you're going to do that is different. Okay. So that means really internalizing. It's like, so what am I doing wrong currently? And maybe there is an inner critic, or maybe there is a sort of a sense of energylessness, a sort of a sense of fatigue, or I don't know, maybe even resentfulness or anger or self-directed disgust. It can be a whole variety of things, but you need to understand what that is. What is the problem? Where are you currently? What would you like instead? And in order for that to become a meaningful you, what would you require? So this is the moment of getting the magic wand out. Okay. So what would I need to believe in order for that to become possible? And if that's too big a stretch, well, what would be the stepping stones in order for me to get to the point where that would be possible? And that is what you then start sticking on the bathroom mirror. They are the mantras that you start telling yourself. There are lots and lots of simple ways that you can do this once you've reached that point that something's going to change, that it's important that your inner dialogue changes. And it's going to be based around the idea there are certain simple things that you can do to shift your inner dialogue after you've made that decision that this is the moment where something's going to change. Okay? So the entirety of an NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is based around these sort of ideas. So as a simple example, when you're dissatisfied with your current reality, you're kind of thinking, well, I'm here and I want to be here. I should be doing something better. I should be elsewhere in life. I should have something different. Okay. That is already creating a sense of inner defensiveness. Yeah. It's like you're not good enough. You should be trying harder, thinking differently, whatever it may be. So if you just shift the word should to could, I could think differently. I could act in a different way. You're giving yourself possibility, right? And there is no internal defensiveness against I could because you're giving yourself options. Yeah, that's a wonderful one. Another one, I have to. Yeah, I must. A bit stronger than I should. I've got to do X, Y, Z. Yeah, massive internal defenses against, oh, I don't want to do these things that I have to do. Again, you could shift that to I get to. I have the opportunity to. I wonder what might happen if I were to do this instead. Bringing a sense of curiosity, a sense of adventure, a sense of wonderment. Yeah. That works, right? But again, it only works after you've decided that the previous way of thinking isn't working for some reason or other, and you are prepared in a small way to suspend your disbelief that this other nonsense could potentially work. Yeah. And rather than telling yourself that that's not going to work, instead you give it a go with a sense of open minded curiosity where everything is play, where everything is interesting, and then you'll see what comes back. Yeah. Curiosity is the gateway to so much because it's simply opening up your possibility to new experience. You can then continue. You can go as far as you like with this. Yeah. So you might want to get to the point of, okay, so where am I in my life? What do I want in my life? What do I want in my friendships, in my income, in my work situation, in my intimate relationships, in my family situation? What do I want to do in my spare time? Anything that is important to you that seems to be lacking at this moment. Where is it that I would like to be? And what would I have to believe in order to permit myself to go down that route? And if that sounds a bit of a big stretch, then what would be the stepping stones to get there and start thinking about that? So again, you can stick them on your bathroom mirror, or you can simply notice the times internally when you're speaking in the opposite way to that, and then just pause, respond rather than react. You just take a moment's gap and you go, ah, there we go again. There's that risk manager monkey, and choose a different way of thinking and see how that feels. Because ultimately, this has to become believable. This has to become a new normal, which means giving it um, your willingness to play with it. Yeah, it's a collaborative experience with this thing which is creating these words. And then, other side of that is a sort of a naturalization to a new type of relationship with yourself. Another way that you might want to consider all of that is to look at your higher self and say, from my higher self, Is the way that I am currently talking to myself enabling? Is this freeing me to be whatever it is that I really ought to be? Or is this getting in the way? What would my higher self choose to do? And you might be able to use that as a motivating factor, because it's extremely hard to do this from a willpower perspective alone. You need something which will sustain you through the point at which you go to yourself, "Oh, this is nonsense. It's not working." I've said in another one of my videos that habits typically take at least 30 days to shift, and people tend to overestimate their capacity to make change in the short term and seriously underestimate what they can do, their capacity for the long term. So most of the time we kind of give up before we notice the improvements, because 30 days is a long time when you're doing something new. So it's important to not simply use willpower as a way of, kind of beating yourself to do things better, to do things more correctly, and instead aspire towards some glorious golden carrot in front of you that will lead you in the direction that you choose to go. Yeah. End result of all that is that there is a certain point, if you are prepared to live with the new sense of reality, if you'll allow your ego to shift what it thinks is possible, where the entire premise of talking to yourself somehow no longer has the relevance that it used to. Because if you're able to open yourself up to all things, well, then you're going to open yourself up to awe, to joy, to love, to passion, to things that it's very, very hard to describe in words, for experiences that seem to be so large that they defy explanation. At which point this entire internal chatter somehow reduces its gravitas. It's less important than it was before. It's there, it's a useful tool, but it's not the end goal. You've completely transformed at that point your relationship to yourself, and you understand that even the words, the mental chatter, even the inner critic, when he's there or she's there, he's just an element, and that there is a far deeper, more existential approach to yourself, which somehow or other is actually bigger than words. I hope that that little nugget is sufficient to encourage you to give it a go. Yeah. This is a way of doing the whole persuasion thing. Yeah. Thank you for watching. I hope that's useful. Yeah, give it a go. It's clear that it can work, but the only way that this can work is when you have already made the decision that for some reason or another, you're going to try something different. That's all it takes. You don't even need to know what it is that you're going to do different. You can follow these instructions, yeah, or you can follow a book or whatever it may be. You don't even need to believe the book, but you do need to believe that there is something out there that you're currently not experiencing, and that you're prepared to give it a go and see what the feedback is. And you're also prepared to accept that it probably won't work in the way that you expect it to, that you'll probably forget from time to time, that you'll probably make mistakes, but that none of that means you should give up. Yeah, that in actual fact, that's just part of the journey, because even when we learn to walk, we fall over. Yeah. So you go through all of that with a sense of self-acceptance, that I have chosen to build a nicer relationship with myself. I'm going to permit myself the possibility to consider other options than I previously was. And maybe by listening to my words, that's already brought along a few ways that you can understand that this can actually be incredibly easy, that it can be effortless, that the only thing that you're doing is beginning with a notification inside of your head that your mind is talking in a way which is less than helpful, and choosing to do something different, and then habituating that to the point where it's automatic, and then forgetting about the rule book. But it starts with becoming your own authority figure. It starts with taking a decision which demands courage, which says, I am not going to be led by my fear. I'm going to be led by something which is drawing me towards, which maybe I can't even describe in words, but that appears to be leading me somewhere better than my current experience. And then just seeing what comes. Thank you very much for watching. I hope that's of interest. If when you listen to all of that, there's still a voice at the back of your mind saying, well, that's not going to work for me, something like that, then get in touch, yeah, or have a chat with someone who does something on that kind of body brain relationship. You know, the reason why I am so evangelical about hypnosis is that it is going beyond the critical chattering part of your mind and getting you back in relationship with all of you. So if there is this story still running inside your head, even when you're watching this, that says, well, yeah, but, you know, that is a subconscious response, which it doesn't matter how much you try and outthink it, in itself, it's not going to work. So you're either going to have to decide that that simply exists and laugh about it. It doesn't matter. And then go and try a new experience and learn from the new experience and readjust your internal observations. Or you can do something like hypnotherapy. You can do something like deep inner meditation, inner reflection, effectively what it is it that is making my meaning, and shift that. Yeah. So if you've still got this kind of, oh, I'm not too sure about this sort of thing, if you're not prepared to give it a go, then yeah, get in touch, or have a chat with someone nearby wherever you are, and open up, yeah, and listen to the yeah but part, and then go with that. All right, thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.